Shohei batting. Here's a long fly ball into right field. It's a home run in the stands. Babe Ruth jogging home. That puts the Yankees 1 run ahead of the Cubs.
Now, 1919 was Ruth's great year with the Red Sox. I mean, he'd stopped being a pitcher. He was pitching some, helping out, but by the end of July, the Red Sox brought up Waite Hoyt, who was just a young pitcher then, and Waite Hoyt took Ruth's place really in the pitching order, and the transition was made. And this was interesting because Hoyt later joined the Yankees, was a great friend of Ruth's later on. But Ruth, that year, began hitting home runs at a record pace. The old record was, an ancient record of 27, set back in the 1880s. And Ruth moved towards it just inexorably during the season. Hitting 20 home runs was almost unheard of in those years. But Ruth passed 20, went on to 23, 24, 26. I think it was in September, the Red Sox, who had a bad year themselves, they only finished 6th that year, I think, had a doubleheader with the White Sox, and the White Sox were the best team in baseball that season. Tremendous team, great stars all through it. And they had a marvelous pitcher named Lefty Williams. And Williams was pitching against the Red Sox in Fenway Park, and the Babe came up. Tremendous crowd there for Babe Ruth Day. And Ruth hit a home run to left field. Now, a left-handed hitter hitting a home run off a left-handed pitcher to left field was just almost unheard of in that day. It was an exceptional thing. And Ruth not only did it, he did it off this left-handed pitcher who was so good, and he hit a tremendous shot way, way back. It was an amazing home run. So amazing that Buck Weaver, the third baseman of the White Sox, came past the Red Sox dugout and said, "That's the most amazing thing I ever saw in my life." He just couldn't believe it. There's this tremendous home run. Ruth awed even the other players. Now, this was all very interesting because Ruth, in hitting that home run, tied the old record. He broke it a couple of days later. He was going up this way, and the team he was playing that day were the famous Chicago Black Sox, infamous famous Chicago Black Sox, who that year threw the World Series to the Cincinnati Reds. A year later, the scandal broke, and eight of the White Sox were banished from baseball. The White Sox fell down out of the sky, not the cellar, but close to it, or just nothing much after that. So you had this passage, you might say, of Ruth going up and the White Sox going down, all happening this one great day in Boston in September 1919. And then in December that year, and January was the deal that sent Ruth from Boston to New York, and his career just went zoom like that. A year later, Ruth was finishing the 1920 season where with the Yankees he hit 54 home runs to obliterate his old record that he set a year earlier. And the White Sox, late in the season, the scandal broke. The news came out that they had thrown the series in 1919. And this shattered baseball. They were terrified. Some of the clubs felt that they were going to be in great trouble the next year. Attendance would fall off. And in 21, Ruth with the Yankees had his greatest season, even greater than his 1927 season when he hit 60 home runs. Just an astonishing year. And all over the league, people would come out to the ballpark to see Ruth and the Yankees, who were on their way, by the way, to their first pennant ever. The first pennant the Yankees ever won was 1921. And Ruth was, of course, the dominant force of the team. And he also was the dominant force in keeping attendance up. Maybe not the only thing, but the dominant thing. And all around the league, were owners who were afraid that this scandal was going to just shatter the faith of baseball fans. Loved to see Ruth come in because people came to the ballpark. And if they came once, they'd come again. So that really was the way that Ruth, well, saved baseball is what they say, that Ruth saved baseball. And if he didn't save it himself, he certainly contributed amazingly that year with his home run hitting and the excitement. And he broke his record again. He had 59 home runs, the phenomenon is just astonishing. You think how many that was in that day before people hit home runs. I mean, even now, this year with all the home runs being hit, 50 home runs is an amazing feat. And Ruth hit 59. 59. So now Ruth's in New York. The Yankees have bought him. He comes to the club. He started out a little bit slowly, then he started to hit, and he had a marvelous year. And fans just poured out to see him. They're playing in the Polo Grounds. The former Major League record for attendance had been set by the Giants, McGraw's Giants, about 10 or 12 years before. They drew something like 910,000. Ruth and the Yankees obliterated that record. They drew, I think, 1,289,000, something like that. But that meant they broke the old record by 25%. They just shattered it. And this made John McGraw very unhappy because this was his ballpark and his city, and the Yankees were taking it over. And that led later on to the departure of the Yankees from the Polo Grounds and the construction of Yankee Stadium. But Ruth, in the Polo Grounds, was drawing these people from all over. His nickname, Bambino, came out of that. This was sort of the apex of the great immigration into this country, and there were many, many people of foreign extraction, still with foreign languages, and a big part of New York were Italians. And people would say, how did the Bambino do today? How did the Babe do? And so Bambino, they started to call him, and this got into the headlines, and the Bam went with a bam of a home run. So the headlines would say, Bam hits one, Bambino hits two, things like that. New York really took to Ruth. They loved him. Years and years later, when Roger Maris broke his record, Jimmy Dykes, the old ball player and manager, said, Roger Maris is a fine ball player, a marvelous ball player. He said, but I can't see him driving down Broadway in a low-slung convertible wearing a coonskin coat. That was Ruth. He was on display. Ruth liked the limelight. He liked to be in the public eye. He'd pose for photographers any place. He'd sign autographs. He'd do things. He didn't do it out of a sense of duty so much as a sense of joy. And this was the thing that Ruth had, beyond everything